All right, welcome back. Election recounts. It's the big story tonight. The current situation, though, hardly the first time that this has happened in American history. The 2000 Bush-Gore situation, of course, is the first one that comes to mind. Joining us now, historian Craig Shirley and Doug Wead, author of Inside Trump's White House. Gentlemen, good to see you. Craig, I'll start with you. Obviously, this has happened before. Tell us a little bit more about the history of the recount.
Well, most recently, before 2000, you'd have to go back to 1960, when there was recounts in a half dozen states between Nixon and John Kennedy. Ironically, is that the one state which they did flip, the Nixon forces insisted on a recount in Texas, or I beg your pardon, in Hawaii, and they forced a recount, and they discovered uncounted votes for John Kennedy. The three electoral votes in Hawaii actually flipped from Nixon to Kennedy, which was an unintended consequence of the recount. So recounts can sometimes backfire on you.
That's interesting. Doug, I mean, talk a little bit about that. I mean, I was under the impression that these things rarely led to a change.
Well, historically, Craig will remember one of the great, well, may not remember, he wasn't alive then, but one of the most dramatic and scandals was the corrupt bargain. And that's when there was a populist president that reminds me of Andrew Jackson. In fact, I was the first historian to make that comparison. Andrew Jackson was extremely popular. He opposed the national bank, a second national bank, said only rich people get that. So he drew huge crowds. He was the first celebrity president. And the establishment kept him out of the White House, the corrupt bargain. They decided the presidency in Congress. They chose John Quincy Adams, who had been a part of every administration from George Washington. He was the sixth president, but the people revolted, and the next election, they overwhelmingly elected Andrew Jackson. The populist won. So we see with Donald Trump, he's eliminated the regulations. That's why the big monopolies hate him. And the media is owned by those big monopolies, or they sponsor those big monopolies. It's why the think tanks hate him, because he's the great deregulator.
Right. Yeah, he's the wrecking ball in D.C. That's what he's that's what he did. Craig, bring us up to today, knowing what you know about history and looking at this recount, what they're trying to do here. What are the chances?
Well, they're not good, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go through it. Look, we're only in the first phase of what really should be a 3 phases to a recount, which is the actual counting of the ballots. They haven't finished counting in the half dozen states, so you need to count them first. Then you don't go through the certification process. You go through the recounting process. That takes another couple weeks, and then you're looking at the legal options. And so it looks like Trump does have some good legal claims in some states. Whether or not it's going to amount to enough to overcome Biden's lead in, say, Philadelphia or Pennsylvania or other states is open to question. But he does have a good claim to make in several states.
Mark Halperin's been kind enough to sit here with us all night. I'm going to let him jump in for a quick question, guys.
Gentlemen, I'd love to hear it from each of you, since you have such a keen sense of history. What would you say the history, one sentence historical headline would be on the 2020 election? Craig?
6-5 split them if you're at Belmont Racetrack.
What about you, Doug?
Well, I'd say that one of America's greatest presidents, perhaps its greatest one-term president in history, the first president in 40 years who didn't invade somebody. That's pretty amazing. Peace in the Middle East. And if he does get reelected, great. If he doesn't, that's an amazing moment in history.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, it shows you the power of the media that for 4 years did nothing but try to destroy the President of the United States. Craig Shirley and Doug Wead, gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
My friends are calling me all the time and writing me and saying, "You've disappeared from television. We can't find you. We don't see you anymore." This is the only way we've figured out how to beat the censors. If you subscribe to this channel, hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell, you'll get notification when I'm on TV. Otherwise, you won't get my Instagrams, my messages on Facebook. It's censorship. So I want to hear from you. I want you to be able to hear from me.